Welcome to Coleman Report Live. I'm Bob Coleman. We're talking Main Street and the small business lenders who help it grow. Katie Roach, our editor out of Washington. Lance Sexton, Coleman, webinar instructor extraordinaire out of Arkansas. Chris Hearn, our weekly guest from the C-Suite Perch, CEO of the small business licensing company. Is it a licensing company? Is it? SBLC.
Lending.
We'll leave it at SBLC.
Small business lending company. Yep. Fountainhead.
There you go. We appreciate all your support. Our numbers keep growing. For those of you who are new, feel free to download this for evidence of training. And let's do this. Let's put this on hold. I know we have a lot of news today, Chris. I'm going to have you lead off. What's going on? What do they call it? These solving problem caucus. What's going on?
There's a group this morning in Washington. There's 25 Republicans, 25 Democrats called the Problem Solvers Caucus, who has put forth a new compromise coronavirus stimulus bill. And I don't have all the details yet, but it looks to be about a $1.5 trillion plan, so somewhat between both extremes that we've already heard about. It includes $240 billion for another round of PPP loans, includes $50 billion for targeted employee retention tax credits, and a variety of other things that have been, both sides have been fighting about for a couple months now. But
Chris, you said 25 Republicans, 25 Democrats, House, Senate. What's the makeup?
It's a mix of House and Senate.
Mix, okay.
Yeah. So the point is, I think there's been a lot of posturing over the last 2 to 3 weeks,
really?
Particularly. Yeah, just a little bit. I've called it political theater a little bit, which is both sides somehow have figured out that there may be some political calculus to keeping the American public hostage until past the election. And maybe cooler heads are prevailing now, and maybe this Problem Solvers Caucus is going to bring both extremes to the table to negotiate, because I think this would be positive. I think we are headed for catastrophic damage in October, right after the fiscal year ends, right after the quarter ends, if we don't get something done here over the next couple of weeks. And so I think this is a step in the right direction.
Definitely uncharted territory, and we're, from what little I know and what we all read, is we're about halfway through this fun journey, and we need to figure out how to finish it off without destroying Main Street. Katie, you're reporting there's about the House passed 4 stimulus-related bills. What's going on with that?
Those bills I'll get into a little bit later. I think we have a slide that summarizes them, but they're not so much stimulus as they are more on the regular programs. Here they are actually, so I guess I can go over this and we can go to polls later. The 4 bills are bipartisan support. They passed very easily. One was the STEP Improvement Act. That's just going to reinstate the STEP pilot grant initiative through 2024. The second one is the Microloan Improvement Act. Basically just makes it easier for lenders to provide affordable microloans and technical assistance to entrepreneurs. Northern Mariana Islands apparently did not have a lot of access to SBA. That's now been opened up with this bill, if it of course passes in the Senate. And then finally, the Microloan Transparency and Accountability Act of 2020, just more technical assistance to microlenders in rural areas.
Well, the good news is, I mean, none of these are earth-shattering, but at least we're moving in the right direction. Chris, how many deals have you done in the Northern Mariana Islands?
That's one of the few places I have not done alone yet, Bob. Yeah, it's part of the U.S. or Commonwealth.
I'm embarrassed to say I don't even know where they are. They're not near Guam. They're south of Guam, southeast.
Somewhere in the Pacific, I think. Yeah.
Pacific. There we go.
Somewhere.
Somewhere in the Pacific Ocean. All right, we got it covered. All right, well, very good. Let's go to the poll question. So, what do you think? Something going to happen this week?
Oh.
I'll let you go first, Chris.
I don't think this is the week.
You and everyone else.
I think next week at best. maybe a crash to the end at the end of September. I think that's a more likely response.
Katie, what do you think?
I think we're looking at maybe a little bit longer, hopefully with what Chris is saying and also with the passing of a couple more bills here. Maybe they're going to pull out the SBA section of it and maybe try to pass that separately. That would be great. But unless they do that, I think we might be in it for a little while.
Well, Lance, I'll let you back clean up. What do you think?
I'm going to say no. And but Chris has delivered the most encouraging news of the day to me, that we now have a problem solvers caucus. Hopefully they'll do exactly what Katie was talking about, skinny out some of the, I hate to use the word skinny because that didn't pass, but emaciated. I'm not sure what the word is, but they'll pull the SBA part of the bill out and get some traction and get it passed. And Bob, you said it earlier, and Chris also, I'm concerned about October. I really am. We need something to happen before October. Chris, one of the things that also comes into play, CARES Act payments. This month's it for a majority of the people that are getting them. So, it could be a double whammy. It could be a borrower who had a PPP loan, used up that money, and the CARES Act payments are coming to a halt. They really need some help.
Well, and I've seen some of the statistics out there in the last week or so. I mean, I think it was NFIB said 88% of all PPP recipients have used up all their funds now. So we've got that. We've got the CARES Act P&I payments are gone. You've got some of the targeted industries the funds are done by September 30th. Just logistically, corporate America tends to make decisions on a quarterly basis. Government programs tend to operate on a fiscal year basis. Everything seems to be coming to a head here at the end of September, and it greatly concerns me. I wish that we could pull out the SBA stuff from all the other stimulus, because I think still the SBA programs, the support is typically bipartisan. I think there's very few people that don't support some of these actions that we're all talking about. But I don't, that's the wisdom of Washington is going to put all these things together, I suspect. The only bill I think has a chance to be passed separately is the Senate bill 4117, which is the Paycheck Protection Program Forgiveness Act that the four senators, 2 Republican, 2 Democrats, are really pushing. I still think that one may have a chance to be passed separately from all the stimulus bills. But I just it's not going to be good if we get into October. I know there's some folks that think for political calculation reasons it's going to help, but I think the American public is starting to get really irritated at the political class the longer this goes. Much more irritated than perhaps in the past.
Chris, give me the bullet points. I'm sorry, Chris, give me the bullet points of that paycheck protection bill.
Well, this is the one that we've talked about dozens of times, just the 150,000 or below PPP loans. They'll have the blanket forgiveness. Right. Yeah, it's picked up a lot of co-sponsors, and I think it's the only one that has a shot of maybe being passed standalone.
Go ahead, Lance.
Chris, I was looking for an investment in some psychological counseling company that's public because, Chris, I talked about this yesterday. There's a tremendous amount of anxiety on the part of small business owners who have PPP loans on forgiveness because they're calling their local financial institution, just like you, me, everyone else. We're saying, hey, you got to hang on. There's probably going to be simplified forgiveness. But, I may have gotten 6 calls from the same borrower in a week checking in on simplified forgiveness. So that would be tremendous if they got that passed.
Well, we saw, you bring up a point, Lance, and maybe in jest, but we sometimes forget the fact that this has been an extraordinarily trying time for everybody. Everybody's anxiety is up. Everybody's paranoia is up. Everybody's patience is running out. Everybody's more fatigued than usual. And you start adding into this all these uncertainties and all this ambiguity that still remains. And it is a deeply troubling time for a lot of folks. And all we want is our elected officials to do what generally we all agree on. We want to move past this. We want to try to get to the other side. We want to get to those good, blessed days where we can fight, about politics in the usual way. But right now is probably not the time. Right now is a time where we need to elevate a bit above some of these things because we have a fundamentally broken economy still. It's limping along, and I'm afraid you're going to have a lot of small businesses completely go out of business altogether.
Well, they already are.
You're going to have more unemployment come October. And it's just, trust me, I was very excited to see some of the glimmers of hope in August and September and a lot of the economic reports. But I think the best, we've seen the best so far, unless we can get something passed here soon. October is going to get ugly.
Lance, walk through, I'm changing the subject, walk through the procedure, the logistics of PP loans and how we get them submitted, how we get them approved, how do we notify the borrower? Tell us what happens. Let's do a PPP.
Well, I'm not going to talk about every step, but effectively right now, depending on the type of PPP loan, it's either going to be the SBA Form 3508 or 3508 Easy. They're going to complete the forms, gather the information, and then the participant financial institution is going to review it and make a decision and then submit it to SBA's portal. There are a handful of people, according to the poll question, that have submitted.
Yeah, 1/3.
For forgiveness. I'm wondering if they were submitted and approved by SBA. I'd be really curious how many were actually approved by SBA. I think a lot of financial institutions or participant lenders still probably have not fully opened up their portals for forgiveness for the borrowers yet.
Yeah. Interesting comment from Nancy. They've submitted roughly 40 forgiveness apps, but none have been approved by SBA. Lance, how does this work? The lender has to sign off on the borrower's forms, then it goes to SBA and they sign off on it. Does the lender have final say? What's going on with that?
Well, the lender makes the decision on recommended forgiveness. It's submitted to SBA, but then SBA is going to go in, just like we were talking about yesterday. SBA is going to go in and look if there's some sort of adjustment necessary because of idle. They will look at other things, but SBA ultimately will have the final say on the amount of the forgiveness. I think most participant lenders, when they jumped into PPP, thought this was going to be a 6 or 8 month process, and then they were done. And Chris, I see you smiling. You probably agree with me. It may be a 2 or 3 or 4 year process.
Don't say that.
I'm afraid Lance is probably right. At least a year or two, and it could go longer for sure. Yes, but particularly given that all of the late round PPP loans have 5-year terms too.
Chris, from a management review or time allocation, we're hoping for the 150, but let's say you have a $500,000 application for the borrower. How much time do you think that your institution or all institutions should spend on that application? What do you think is a decent benchmark? Have you even thought that yet?
That's hard to say. I think it really depends on how tech enabled the institution is. Our as Lance just said, and the poll question just showed, you got almost 3/4 of all lenders who have not submitted anything to SBA yet. Most of them have not stood up a platform to accept the forgiveness submissions yet. We are about there. We're probably going to set it up yet this week. Ours is pretty user focused in terms of what the borrower has to do to tell us. So we're trying to keep the friction points as short as possible, and our obviously man hours on this is as limited as we can. But at the end of the day, the way the regs currently read, we have to accept a fair amount of documentation that we have to upload. We have to make the representations that that we believe that this is actually forgivable about this much based on these reasons, and then we have to submit it to SBA. I still have yet to hear of any lenders who have gotten forgiveness on the loans yet from SBA. I'm sure there's a handful, but it's again, very few and far between. So it's tough to answer that question, Bob. It really depends. If you're doing this manually, my goodness, I mean, you may be spending an hour or more on every file at least. But if you're tech enabled, hopefully you can cut it down to, I don't know, 15, 20, 30 minutes. Who knows?
Well, and part of the problem too, Chris, is you get conflicting information on how forgiveness is calculated. And I think we have a question that's going to pop up here in a little bit that talks about that. So when we get to it, Chris, I want you to jump in with me on it.
Sure.
Let's see. Russell says they've submitted 7, no response from SBA. Phillips said they've submitted 4, no response. Hunt said they've submitted 22, but none have been approved so far. They've been pending. Nancy said they've submitted 40, no response. So
well, no, let's not forget that. First of all, that's not shocking to me, Bob. But let's not forget it's not done there either, because the borrowers actually can appeal. If for some reason they didn't get 100% forgiveness or whatever they thought they should get, they can appeal, which is further going to draw this process out, to Lance's point. And we're not entirely sure how long they're going to take to review the appeal, or if the appeal will be favorable or not favorable, and then what? I mean, there's just a lot of unknowns still.
I guess my question, Chris, is what is the incentive to the lender to turn this down? You're going to get nothing but grief.
There's not much incentive other than just upholding the the integrity of the SBA and the program, sure, which obviously we should all be focused on and concerned about. But there will be some lenders, much like there were lenders who processed, any PPP application that came in, just kind of threw it up against the wall, and they're going to get caught. You're going to have similar aspects of forgiveness, I'm afraid. Which is actually part of the argument for why that Senate bill 4117 ought to get passed, because some of that will take care of this, and yet still require the under penalty of law for the borrowers, if they've done something they shouldn't have done, they're still going to have to maintain their documentation, which is just like preparing a tax return. That's something that is auditable, that people can go back and hold them accountable for. So I don't think it's going to be like this, we're letting all the bad apples off. I don't think it's quite going to be like that, like some fear. But it will simplify the process for all parties involved and get people focused on trying to stabilize the economy a bit more.
The Katie Roach, let me interrupt.
The other thing, go ahead.
The Katie Roach fan club has spoken. It says, include Katie a little bit more, please. Katie, what do you think about this discussion?
What specifically about it?
What we want to know is, when you're talking to these lenders, you're talking to Washington, do you see movement on the forgiveness part of it? I guess my first question to you is, do you see it as still a bipartisan support?
For SBA things, pretty much every bill that I've seen so far has gotten a lot of bipartisan support. It's only when you start adding in some of the other stimulus things that you start seeing some separation there. Like Chris said, this forgiveness thing is a separate bill, so it's likely that could pass separately. I haven't heard a lot of naysayers on that particular bill, so I think last I checked, there were over 30 signatures on that. There's probably more now. So it's probably going to pass. It's just a matter of when. I don't know. It's just, we'll see.
Okay. Chris, you and I talked about this, and how important is advocacy at the lender level and at the borrower level?
Well, I think advocacy is extremely important in times like these for everybody who's on this call, this webinar, because you're in the industry, and these things don't just happen by inertia. And frankly, nothing against the trade associations, but the legislators, they'd rather hear from folks like us who are in the trenches daily than another phone call from yet another person at the trade association. They'd also really love to hear from your borrowers. So. Absolutely. The point of this, and I see that you've got this about the thank you letters. I mean, this is something that, we we automated years ago, and we still do, and I think it's highly important. But I will tell you one thing beyond it is picking up the phone and making a call to your representative, making a call to your 2 Senate offices in Washington, and telling them that you are a small business lender, you make SBA loans for a living, you help finance half of the U.S. economy, which is the small business community, and you support the blanket forgiveness, Senate Bill 4117. You support a second round of PPP. I mean, these are important for everybody on this call, and it doesn't even take long, folks. I mean, everybody in your organization ought to be doing this. Everybody who's on this call, you should encourage your borrowers to do it. It's not that complicated, but the pressure needs to come from the industry to get these things done, because otherwise, left to their own devices, they continue to hold the public hostage and for these silly political gains. And we all know, because we've all saved businesses. Those of us who are probably on this webinar have participated in PPP. We saw the impact of that. We see when we make a 7A loan what that does for a community and for a business owner and their employees. It's important that they hear from you in Washington, and don't just say you're going to do it. Actually do it for once. We need to do it in times like these. They need to hear from us, because somebody is in DC with a checklist and they're ticking it off. Oh, here's another person that supports this. Here's another person that supports this. Here's a person that's offered to talk with us, who's actually offered to make their borrowers available to us, a real small business owner. Congressmen and women love to hang out with a small business owner just for the photo, the optics alone.
Yeah,
so
and
making that
photos.
available, that's right. It's really important. Yeah. So I can't encourage people enough, this afternoon, spend 5 minutes and just get this done once and for all. Even if you've never done it, it's not that difficult. You're probably going to be talking to somebody who's 22 years old on the other line, who's probably an intern, but they are keeping a record and they are marking it down, and they're going to be letting the chief of staff know, who's going to let that representative or that senator know, hey, we got an influx of calls today, and seems like this is starting to get traction. That's how you make change. That's how you affect political policy.
Very good. Very good. We have a bunch of questions. I'm going to have to hold them over till tomorrow, but I do have this one question from Hannah that came in last week, and I keep holding it over. So let's address her question, Lance. It says, our institution just found out SBA canceled one of our PPP loans. We were not aware of the cancellation until we reconciled our fee report. We have contacted 7A Question, and they advised us to wait until SBA has a solution for reinstatement since the program has been closed. Ideas, Lance?
I really don't know how to address that. That's one, Bob, where you're going to have to work with. There's a normal reinstatement process for a 7A loan. However, I suspect the system will not let you reinstate a PPP loan, so they're going to have to continue to push the SBA for reinstatement of that PPP loan.
We saw 5 or 6 examples like this in the last couple of weeks of the program, and unfortunately, we were not getting responses out of SBA. It was a rather unfortunate time. So I suspect they were hoping that the political process would catch up and it would get extended, but it's really unfortunate. Yeah.
I'm going to leave the last word with Katie. Joseph, bring up the slide on Treasury Secretary Munchin. What is the Secretary telling us, Katie?
So we know that a lot of small businesses have already used up their funds, and they're really needing more funding. And Mnuchin is saying that we really need to stop worrying too much about the deficit and focus more on trying to pass something quickly now. I don't know if everybody necessarily agrees with that or disagrees, but he does really want to push for more negotiation and try to pass something soon.
Well, what that means is the administration is supporting it. Very good. Lance, Chris, any last thoughts?
I saw a couple hours ago, the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, also said she's going to keep the House in session until something gets passed, stimulus related. So again, another bit of positive news, perhaps, Lance.
Yeah, we don't want to focus on. Go ahead,
Hey,
Lance.
Bob, I'm excited to hear that it's a possibility, because in the past couple of days we've been hearing, hey guys, it's going to be after election now.
Yeah, just
we need something in the month of September. So guys, follow Chris's advice. I support it. Call your senator, call your House member, let them know you support this.
or send them a letter too. Send them an email. Real quick, Lance, I apologize for going over your webinar tomorrow. What's so special about that?
We're going to talk about how to develop a compliant credit memo in these interesting times of COVID-19. So we're going to cover some of the additions that you need to have that are relevant to COVID-19 and relevant to the new SOP 5010-6.
Very good. Hey, thank you all very much. Thank you for joining us for Coleman Report Live and for supporting America's Main Street, one entrepreneur at a time. Talk to you tomorrow.
Have a great day.